Craving your next action-packed adventure? Audible delivers thrills of every kind on your command, like Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, where a lone astronaut must save humanity from extinction, narrated with stunning intensity by Ray Porter. From electrifying suspense and daring quest to spine-tingling horror and romance in far-off realms, unleash your adventurous side with gripping titles that'll keep you guessing. Discover exclusive Audible originals, hotly anticipated new releases, and must-listen bestsellers that hook you from the first minute. Because Audible knows there's no greater thrill than the one that speaks to you. Discover what lies beyond the edge of your seat. Start your free 30-day trial at audible.com/WonderyUS. That's audible.com/WonderyUS.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 38 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, what is going on?
It's going good. I don't know. The mojo is reversed today.
The mojo is reversed?
Not reverse. It's slowly on its way.
I don't understand.
I don't either. That's just, I'm off my kilt.
You're off kilter.
Yeah.
Your polarity is reversed.
Yep.
Something's going on because you sound like you got hit in the head with a brick or something.
I did get hit in the head.
Did you?
But they didn't say anything. I mean, should I see anybody about that?
I don't think so. I think you'll be okay.
The headache
Actually, I don't think anybody will notice.
The headache will go away?
So you got that going for you.
Yeah. Well, how long do you think before the dripping of blood in the ear? Is that normal?
That could be a problem. I thought you were going to say the little birdies stop chirping.
No, they're fine. They're flying around. That's good.
So let's start off with our new Patreon supporters. We have Diana Ward, Danny McCullough, Christy Lee, who I think, Gibbs, I'm not positive, this may be Christy from Canadian True Crime.
Great podcast.
She didn't say that. And if it's not, I apologize. But if it is, and Christy is that type of person. She wouldn't throw it out there. But if it is Christy, I want to give her just due because she makes an unbelievably awesome podcast.
Right.
If you haven't checked out Canadian True Crime, you should. It's really good.
And if it's the other Christy Lee, thank you so much.
Whichever Christy Lee it is, we appreciate it very much. We have Steve Goddard, Lauren Rowe, Catherine Darker, Kristen Smith, a.k.a. Joan Crawford, a.k.a. Mama K.
Mama K.
She goes by a lot of different names on social media.
Amazing woman.
And somehow in her Patreon, she put them all in there. I want to give credit to all those different people
Yeah.
that she goes by. We have A.J. Roxy Gifford.
I like the multi-name, but also I always wanted to have that two initial, you know.
You always wanted to be an AJ or a DJ?
Yeah, something like that. You know, or a Big T. What up, Big T?
Your name doesn't start with T.
I'm just...
What about Big M?
Yeah, Big M doesn't sound right.
It doesn't, does it?
No.
So I think, I'm assuming, Gibbs, that AJ Roxy is an amalgamation of two names put together.
If that's what amalgamation is.
Or whatever you want to call it. So AJ and Roxy is what I'm thinking. I could be wrong. It could be AJ Roxy.
Well, thank yous.
You or use.
Use.
Hey, use guys.
Yeah, use guys.
Thank you. But we appreciate it. They or he or she jumped out at our highest Patreon level.
Awesome.
And then, Gibbs, we're going back into the vault. Or to your jail cell, as we also like to call it.
I always tighten up.
And want to single out Shetty Versato.
Shetty.
Shetty has been with us, for a long time, going back to probably February, March timeframe.
This is a cool name because you can put anything in front of it. McShetty, Machete, Lushety. I mean, anything. Doesn't matter. It sounds
And
good.
it would still be cool, right?
Yeah,
And the
exactly.
last name is cool, too. That is just a badass, kick-ass name all the way around.
Yeah. Thanks,
I mean,
Shetty.
you could, with that type of name, Shetty Versato, you could be, Gibbs, a henchman, a top-notch designer. You could do anything with that type of name.
Yeah.
A business mogul, a boxer.
So hopefully, Shetty, you're doing something really cool.
Yeah, I don't know what Shetty's doing, but with that type of name, you could rule the world. So as always, Gibbs, we just want to give a big thanks to everybody that supports us, whether it's on Patreon, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or whether you don't have a computer at all and you just listen to the podcast and tell your friends. Doesn't matter. It's all support. We love it all. And it's what's helped get us to where we're at right now.
You guys rock.
So we have a few voicemails today, Gibbs, and there are some that I want to play at the end, but there's one that I want to play up front.
Hello, Mike and Gibby. This is Froggy Dog. I like your work. Keep up the good work.
All right, so that is the infamous, or more than famous, Froggy Bar, who became a Patreon supporter, Gibbs, a few weeks back, a month back? I don't remember when it was exactly.
Yeah, I think so.
I just remember you and I talking about the name, trying to figure out, is that a real person? Is that a bar? And so I get this voicemail the other night. I listened to it. And after I dribbled down my pants, no. In the beginning, it did kind of freak me out. I'll be honest, a little bit.
yeah, you probably did freak out.
Then once I heard Froggy Bar, I untightened a tad.
Cleaned yourself up?
I cleaned myself up, changed my drawers, and went about my business. But what I did like is the initiative. Love the mystery. To take the time to not only send us a voicemail, but to go the extra step and create the air of mystery. So hopefully we'll get some more from Froggy down the road.
Depends on which way it goes.
Yeah, it depends on which way it goes. So after you're done listening to this, if you haven't already, make sure you jump over, download the most recent episode of True Crime All the Time. We're doing the story of Austin Sigg, a 17-year-old that murdered Jessica Ridgway. This is out in Colorado. And this was a pretty famous story. It was all over the news. And the details of this case, I mean, first of all, you've got a 17-year-old kid who murders a young girl. And what's behind that? It's a tragic tale, but it's also fascinating to try to get into the mind of this kid. And we can because he comes out, right? I mean, he comes out and is pretty forthright with police.
It's a good one. Jump on over and listen.
Are we ready to get into this week's True Crime All the Time Unsolved? So we're talking about the murder of Bob Crane, and that was the theme song from what he was most well known for, and that was the TV show Hogan's Heroes.
Yeah, exactly. That was probably his peak, I would say.
And you and I were talking about it before we started, Gibbs. I mean, this show ran from 1965 to 1971. So I know you were probably in high school when you were watching it. I was not born yet.
I was a little... I wasn't in high school.
I'm just messing with you. But I was not born by the time that this show was over. But I can remember as a kid watching reruns of Hogan's Heroes.
Maybe you were May during the show.
I doubt it. It was off a few years before I was born.
Maybe your parents were watching a rerun at that time.
Yeah, it's not something I really like to think about, but I don't even know where to go from there.
Your poor mom's like, I see nothing.
I know.
Yeah, it was a good show. I enjoyed watching it. You know, the reruns. It was funny back in the day.
Yeah, I have this memory of coming home from school, and I stayed at my grandmother's house, and every day she would have the two little fun-size Three Musketeers. She'd have a glass bottle of Orange Crush for me, and I would just sit there and watch different shows, Gilligan's Island, reruns of all these great classic shows.
So she said, here you are, my future diabetic grandson.
It's probably why I did gain a little bit of weight while I was a kid.
Yeah. Well, three fun size.
Two. I said two,
Did
damn
you
it.
say two?
Two fun size.
Two equals one normal size.
No, these were these were pretty small.
Yeah, whatever.
Still, it was not a good dietary choice, okay?
Yeah.
Let's just put it that
Wash
way.
it down with a little Orange Crush.
Yeah, I did. Oh, man, I used to love Orange Crush. But the other thing is, when you talk about Hogan's Heroes, I don't think you could get away with that show today, Gibbs. PC-wise.
Yeah. They'd have to probably
You
clean
couldn't
it up a little bit.
You couldn't make a show about Nazis. I don't think today. I mean, it's strange because we have shows on the air today that push the boundary way more in terms of language and nudity and sex and all that stuff. But I don't think they would air a show about Nazis holding Americans. Now, a comedy, mind you. This was a comedy.
Yeah, maybe not on the main network, but I think they would on cable. Or,
Oh, wait, shit. You can do everything. You can do anything on that.
What's that? The Hulu and all those.
They could definitely put it on Next Flicks.
Next Flick. And,
There's no doubt about that.
and the good old Amazon Prime.
Next Flicks is looking for stuff.
Yeah, there's always somebody wanting something. Swango, whatever. What's that? Sling.
I'm just letting you go, man.
I know it. Why aren't you helping me here? You know what I'm talking
Because
about.
it's more fun to see where you're going to go.
But you know what I'm talking about.
Well, no, because you said Swango.
No, I think it's Sling.
Are you talking about Slingbox?
Slingbox.
I think is what it's called.
Yeah.
Or something like that. Okay.
Well, don't they have their own network too?
No, I thought Slingbox was something that allowed you to watch what was on your TV.
Oh, so like Slingo and Roku and
What is Slingo?
Sling. I don't know why I'm calling it Slingo.
What's Sling? Is that something? It may be something I'm not aware of.
Yeah. Odds are maybe I got it all wrong.
So let's talk about the early life of Bob Crane. He was born Robert Edward Crane on July 13th, 1928. And like we said, the guy was an actor, pretty well-known actor back in the day.
Sure was.
He starred for 5 or 6 seasons on this Hogan's Heroes, which was a fairly big hit. So he gained a lot of notoriety from that. But he was also a drummer, he was a radio host, and a disc jockey. Crane was born in Waterbury, Connecticut, and he graduated from Stanford High School in 1946. In 1948, Bob enlisted for 2 years in the Connecticut Army National Guard, and he served those 2 years. He was honorably discharged in 1950.
Well, that's pretty cool.
Is it?
Yeah. Yeah, pretty cool. That's all I got.
Okay. And it was during this period of time, during this 2-year stretch, it was actually in 49, that he married his high school girlfriend, Ann Terzian, and they would go on to have 3 children, Robert, Deborah, and Karen. And I think, Gibbs, first and foremost, you would have to say that Bob Crane was an entertainer.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, he was. He really was. He very talented across the board.
And he liked to entertain people, and he started at a very early age. I mean, by the age of 11, he was a drummer. He would perform for anybody that would sit and listen. He was also into drum and bugle parades that either he would participate in, but he would also put his own together. Like he would actually put together a parade, try to get people to be in this parade with him. And then as he got into high school, he naturally gravitated towards the marching band and the jazz band. He liked music and he liked performing for people.
And he did it well.
And that's the other thing that I think you would say about Bob Crane is he was good at a lot of things. You know, what he put his mind to, he was going to be good at. I mean, he even played for the Connecticut and Norwalk Symphony Orchestras in what was some type of youth program that they had.
That's impressive.
Well, it had to have been. It's, you know, we were talking about symphony orchestras. Now, it's a youth program.
Yeah.
But I'm sure you had to be talented to get in.
Oh, absolutely. Were you in the band?
When I was really young, I played the trumpet.
Well, I figured you were a flute guy.
I know you played the piccolo. And now your brain's working to figure out what a piccolo is.
What the heck's a piccolo?
So we get back to 1950. This was after he was discharged from the National Guard. He started working at WLEA in New York. This is where his broadcast career started. Bob would go on to work for WBIS in Connecticut and then get bumped up to WICC. And this was what you'd call like a regional powerhouse, Gibbs, in the Northeast of the United States.
Yeah, I think it's back then, and that was like a 1,000-watt radio station.
So in the 1950s, he's moving up the ladder. You know, like we said, this guy's talented.
He's a go-getter.
He's a go-getter. He's taking one step after another up the ladder. And it's in 1956 that Bob gets his big break. He's hired by CBS Radio as a morning host in Los Angeles.
That's a good gig.
It's a good gig, and it's about as far of a move as you can make.
Yeah, exactly, right there.
From the Northeast to Los Angeles.
Yeah. Honey, pack the kids up. We're headed west.
And the station was WKNX, and Bob's the morning host, and he was known for being funny. He did some stuff with his drums.
So kind of like me.
Yeah, kind of just an all-around virtuoso of just a comedic force, really.
You want me to get the drums out and do a little solo?
Yeah, I want you to do a drum solo.
Yeah.
And make it funny.
And make it funny at the same time.
At the same time. But he's in Los Angeles, and to give you an idea of how big a show this was, or what a big platform this was, he interviewed people like Marilyn Monroe, Frank Sinatra, Bob Hope. I mean, it doesn't get much bigger than those three people.
Especially at that time.
At that time.
I mean,
well, right now, if you could interview him, you'd be off the charts.
Be more than off the charts.
Your ratings would be pretty high.
You'd have some special powers since they're all three dead.
They're no longer with us.
So, but it'd be cool. I mean, Sinatra, come on, man. To be able to sit in a room with him and talk.
Yeah, which of the three, which one would you rather interview?
I think Sinatra.
I'd go Bob Hope.
Bob.
I like Bob.
Bob probably could tell you because he probably talked to both of them.
Well, Frank and Bob would have unbelievable stories. If they would share their secrets, you know they had some juicy stories, the two of them.
Now, if it was a dinner date, I'd have to pick, Marilyn.
Well, that's a given.
Have a drink with Frank and then go on to dinner with Marilyn.
All right, don't get ahead of yourself, player.
While we see a show with Bob Hope.
In using his talent, Bob took this show to number one in his market. And it wasn't very long before he was known out there as the king of the airwaves. I mean, he was killing it.
Well, when you're having guests like that on and, and his rapport and everything, man. And that's when radio was huge.
Radio was really big. Television was still pretty young, right, in the 50s. It hadn't been around all that long. And radio had been around a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I think majority of the population had radios.
Yes.
TVs were up, still, rolling into the family.
Yeah, I would agree. Now, Crane's next big break came guest hosting some television shows, and one was a show called Who Do You Trust? And Johnny Carson was the host of Who Do You Trust? And Crane guest hosted for him.
Which is pretty impressive, really.
Yeah, it was a big show. I mean, I don't remember it. I've heard of it. Now, he wasn't the Carson that we would ultimately become to know. I mean, he wasn't Johnny at that point, but he still had his own TV show.
He did.
So, we know Johnny's the man.
Johnny.
But he also guest hosted for Alfred Hitchcock, GE Theater, Dick Van Dyke Show.
Which was a huge show.
It was a big show back in the day.
He's still kicking it, too.
Which is amazing.
Yeah.
Dick Van Dyke has been around forever.
Ever. Still funny, too.
And then in 1963, Bob Crane became a regular on the Donna Reed Show.
And that was another big show.
That was a big show back then.
And I still wasn't born yet. Just wanted to get that out there.
Just wanted to get it out there for everybody.
Yep.
But, I mean, you can see what he's doing, right? He's taking leap after leap. And it's because he was talented. And he kept parlaying one successful venture into something bigger.
Well, CBS was pretty smart. They saw that when they hired him to do the radio show. I mean, back then you had just a few networks, mega players, and they were pretty smart on locking them down early on.
And it would just be a couple years later when he would get his big role as Colonel Robert Hogan in the CBS sitcom Hogan's Heroes. Like we talked about, ran from 65 to 71. And Bob would receive 2 Emmy nominations for his performance on the show. So like we talked about, I mean, this was the peak of his career. During the show's run, Bob would get romantically involved with Sigrid Valdis, whose real name was Patricia Olson. And Patricia played Hilda on the show with Bob.
That's the secretary to Colonel Klink, is who that is. I found it interesting that she replaced the original Hilda, which Bob actually dated as well.
Well, we're kind of foreshadowing some things that are to come. Bob was a player. I mean, I don't know how else you would say it, Gibbs. He was a ladies' man.
He liked the ladies.
He liked the ladies. He liked his Cavassier. No, I don't know about that part, but he's working day in and day out with these women. He's becoming romantically involved with them to the point where he would later divorce his wife. They'd been married for over 20 years at this point, so that he could marry Patricia Olson in 1970. He would have a son and an adopted daughter with Patricia during their time together, but they would separate in 1977. But the two would continue to see each other off and on up until the day that Bob died. Now, after Hogan's Heroes, Bob would go on to guest star in some movies. He was in a couple of Disney movies, and then he eventually got into dinner theater.
Which I'm guessing at that point, that I don't want to say that's a low, but I'm assuming at that point it's a notch down.
Well, and not to put anybody down that is doing dinner theater, but when you're the star or have been the star of a major network sitcom, a popular sitcom that ran for 6 years, you would have to say that that was a step down in his career.
I would think. I mean, it's not even going back to, not back to, but it's not even going to Broadway, right? I mean, it's traveling state to state, city to city, dinner theater. Still a good gig.
Well, and probably better for Bob Crane than it would be for most people.
Yeah.
Because of his name.
Oh, absolutely.
So my assumption is that he was probably the headliner. He was being paid not to the level that he would be in a movie or starring on a show, but I'm sure they were paying him some cash.
Yeah. I'm sure some of our celeb friends will reach out and let us know.
Because we have a lot. In 1973, Bob bought the rights to a comedy play, and it was called Beginner's Luck. And he began touring around the country. He was starring and directing this play. And he would play places like the Showboat Dinner Theater in St. Petersburg, Florida, and the Windmill Dinner Theater in Scottsdale, Arizona, as well as a host of other dinner theaters around the country. But that's not the only thing that he was doing. In between his theater shows, He was also guest starring in a number of TV shows. You know, he was in Policewoman,
Oh yeah, remember that?
something called Gibbsville, which maybe I think you made up and stuck in here.
I did not make up anything. Gibbsville, look it up.
I think that was a TV show that you wanted to star in
Gibbsville.
after yourself.
How fun would that be?
Gibbsville.
Gibbsville. Welcome to my world.
Oh shit, that would be an interesting ride.
That would be labeled a variety show.
I think it would be labeled a psychedelic 30-minute romper ride.
It would be best if you did either drink before or
Some kind of hallucinogenic. But he was also on some bigger shows. You know, Quincy, that was a big show
Quincy was a big show.
back in the day.
Yeah.
And The Love Boat.
Love the Love Boat.
Love it.
Remember the Love Boat and Fantasy Island came on the same night.
There's folks out there like, what in the hell are you talking about? I don't know any of these shows. Now, there's a lot of our listeners that are like, that's just bringing back amazing memories.
Yeah. But even the younger ones, age group that listens to this, they call us out all the time when we say they probably wouldn't know. And they're like, no, we do
And they
know.
do. But also, don't forget, you've got like TV Land. You have some channels that are playing some of these old shows. And my kids are watching some weird stuff from back, not weird, but some things from back in the day that I think.
Mayberry and MASH and all. I mean, MASH just picked up a huge contract with AMC, and they run it all the time now.
Love MASH.
So one of the longest running sitcoms.
And in 75, Bob actually got back to TV with his own series, and it was called The Bob Crane Show. And this was actually on NBC. You know, he'd kind of been a CBS man for a long time.
Yeah, and you remember back then, they had a lot of variety shows. I mean, there really was. I mean, even Donnie Marie had a variety show.
Sonny and Cher.
I
I mean, at one point or another, almost every celebrity had a variety show. They tried it. To see what would work. Now, Bob's didn't. It only lasted 13 episodes. It got canceled. And we said it, Gibbs, this guy is an entertainer. So he's staying busy. He's either on TV, guest starring, having his own show, or he's doing dinner theater. I mean, that's what the guy does. In early 1978, Bob Crane taped a travel documentary in Hawaii, and he recorded an appearance on a Canadian cooking show called Celebrity Cooks.
Canadian cooking show. Wonder what my Canadian friends up there.
I don't know. I assume it's just all fatback and maple syrup.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
You get 2 ingredients.
Yeah. Bacon.
And you got to make something out of that.
Maple syrup.
Canadian bacon, though.
Is there any other type of bacon? That's what they would say.
Exactly. We love our Canadian friends. But Gibbs, there's a side that a lot of people at the time didn't know about Bob Crane. And it was that he enjoyed filming and taking pictures of his sexual activities. This was like almost what you'd call like a pastime for him. I mean, he really enjoyed it. And Bob would have a partner in this activity by the name of John Carpenter, who worked for a very famous electronics firm. So John Carpenter had access to all of the latest gadgets. I mean, we're talking the newest, the best video cameras, VCRs, whatever type of electronics you needed, John had access to it.
Yeah, well, he was like the first salesperson out there pushing the VCRs when they first came out. So he's the guy that celebrities called when they wanted one. I mean, he went to Elvis's mansion to hook Elvis up with a VCR back in the day.
I bet he got himself a peanut butter and banana sandwich, too, while he was there.
Bet it was pretty good, too.
I bet it was.
Yeah.
Well, that would be the best peanut butter and banana sandwich you ever ate, sharing with Elvis. If you were just sitting across the table from Elvis, you would think that's the best thing you ever ate.
I think so. I'm not going to argue that one. So in addition to Elvis, I mean, he met with many more high-end celebrities.
And Bob and John, they would meet up regularly, pick up women, go back to Bob's apartment or some other place. But I think a lot of times, Gibbs, it was Bob's apartment.
Yeah, or I think Carpenter, when he came in town, he would rent a hotel room.
Yeah. And then they would record each other having sex with women.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what is going to come out later.
It's a little strange.
And in all reality, Bob Crane was a sex addict before people even knew what the term sex addict really was.
Right, yeah. I mean, he definitely had a fetish.
You know, we're talking about a married man who, it would come out later, had seduced who knows how, maybe hundreds of women over the years. He'd had all these sexual encounters, and along with his friend John Carpenter, had recorded a large number of them. And we didn't mention it when we talked about Hogan's Heroes, but one of the main players on the show was Richard Dawson, who would later go on to become famous for hosting The Family Feud. And I can still picture Richard Dawson kissing every woman, right?
Every woman.
That was like his trademark.
Yeah.
He would go down the line and kiss every woman.
How you doing, honey? How you doing, dog?
Right. And he just had this way about him. But Richard Dawson had a son who, when he was 17 years old, was talking to Bob Crane. And Bob Crane was sharing some of these secrets, right? This is another thing that would come out later. Mark Dawson, the son of Richard Dawson, would say that Bob told him all about this stuff. And it wasn't that Bob just told him about it. I mean, we're talking about a 17-year-old kid, and Bob breaks out pictures and videos that he had taken, along with John, of nude women. And Mark was quoted in an article as saying, you know, the first 10 or 15 minutes was kind of interesting. You know, as a 17-year-old kid,
Yeah, you're seeing
maybe something that you haven't seen or you haven't seen a lot of.
or that volume of.
But then he said, you know, it was also unnerving. You know, it was shocking to see this man that he knew as Colonel Hogan from TV in the buff
That would be a shock.
with other women, with other nude women. And he would say, you know, I could never watch the show again the same way after seeing that. And the thing that Mark would talk about is how excited Bob Crane was to show him this stuff. You know, it was almost like he was showing off his sexual conquests.
The catch of the day.
Yeah. I mean, he would point to each one and say, oh, what do you think about, you know, this person? She's great, isn't she? And Mark said, well, you know, some of them were and some of them weren't. But Bob was really happy, almost like it was Christmas morning as he was opening presents. That's what it was like when he was showing off his pictures and his videotapes.
It's a conquest, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, it's a part of who Bob Crane was, and you have to tell it to tell the whole story.
And we know from different type of addictions, I mean, really, you tape it, I think that, you know, he enjoyed looking back, right? I mean, we talk about how serial killers would like to keep things and they would go back and to revisit that moment. This is his time. He's going back. He revisits those moments when he's had this girl, that girl.
Well, that's his trophies, right?
Yeah.
The Polaroids and the videotapes are kind of like his trophies in the way that,
Sure.
you know, now he didn't kill these women, obviously.
No. I
But
mean,
it's in a similar vein, I guess I'll say, because he's going to use those to relive the experience.
it's no difference than you with this wall behind us where you have all these ribbons from high school where you got 4th and 5th place.
No, it's not even that. Participation.
Participation awards, you know. I mean, clearly you were very active.
I came in 13th place one time.
I mean, you got everything from your sports to your ballet class and everything up
Yeah.
there. So it's impressive.
I like to revisit
You did very well, Gaylord.
all my accomplishments.
You know, Gaylord
Fokker.
Fokker.
And in an interview, Bob's ex-wife, Patricia Olson, would say that, you know, she knew that Bob was in love with her. You know, even when they were married, she knew that he was having sex with other women. He knew that he was photographing these women. And she would say, you know, I know it probably sounds crazy, but how could she be jealous of something like that? That's strange to hear a woman say that, Gibbs, because that's not how most women would react to knowing that their partner is having sex with other women. But she would say that she knew that Bob was just using these women. And she told a reporter that Bob actually said, and this is a quote, I wish when I finished with them, I could just push a button and they'd fall through the floor and disappear. That's rough, man.
It is rough. I mean, it just lets you know this is what he said. This is how he felt about those women.
This is what he thought about women.
Yeah.
Or at least these other women.
Yeah.
Now, his ex-wife didn't feel like he felt that way about her, but she said Bob treated women like the rest of the world treats toilet paper.
Yeah.
Who's going to be jealous of toilet paper? That's the way she felt.
And I see what she's saying. You know, he had no emotional ties to these women. None. It was all physical. Nothing else, nothing more, just pure physical.
Yeah, but that's not how most women would react to that kind of news or that kind of knowledge.
But maybe she loved him so much that that's how she was able to cope with it.
It could be.
And I think that's probably more of that.
But more importantly to me, I think it goes to the mindset of Bob Crane, and specifically of what he thought about women in general that he met on a daily basis. Like we said, they were just conquests.
I mean, if you're thinking the way Bob is thinking, maybe Bob doesn't feel guilty for doing this because I'm not cheating on you because I don't care about them. I'm having the 30-minute, an hour bang session and whatever. I'm done. They're gone. I recorded it for my viewing later. And that's it. I'll never see that woman again. There's nothing there.
Did you say bang session?
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure I heard that right.
That's what it's not some romantic.
No, you're right.
Make love, you know.
No, you're right.
It's next flick and chill.
So we get up to June of 1978. Bob Crane's living on Chaparral Drive, apartment 132A in the Winfield Place Apartments in Scottsdale, Arizona. And at this same time, he's still doing the dinner theater. He's still in that production of Beginner's Luck. He's headlining it at the Windmill Dinner Theater there in Arizona. And it's on the afternoon of June 29th. Bob's co-star in the dinner theater play, Victoria Berry, she goes to his apartment
Around 2:00.
because that day he failed to show up for a meeting, and Victoria finds the lifeless body of Bob Crane.
Yeah, she does. I mean, first she shows up at 2:00 and knocks on the door. No one comes. So then she grabs the handle and the door's not locked. So she kind of goes in and peeks her head in and Bob. Nobody answers.
Bob,
are you there? So anyway, she goes into the room and it's dark and she just notices it looks like a girl laying down, girl with dark hair. But then she thinks, well, what did Bob get himself into? And then she realizes it's blood, not dark hair, it's blood. And then she realizes that there's blood on the wall. So then she's worried what happened to the girl. Then she realizes what she thought was the hair is just dried dark blood at this point, and it's Bob, partially covered with a sheet. More so, she starts freaking out. So then she would say later that so when she saw Bob, he was curled up in a fetal position, and that she would notice that he had a cord wrapped around his neck, and the cord was tied in a bow tie knot. So, of course, she calls the police, and the first officer to arrive is Officer Paulette Cassetti. So she's the first Scottsdale police officer on the scene, and she does the right thing, right? She immediately secures the site, puts the crime scene tape up. It's approximately 3:00, so about an hour goes by, and that's when Lieutenant Dean shows up at the apartment, and then at that point, he heads up the investigation.
And investigators would determine that Bob Crane had been bludgeoned to death with some type of object that was never identified. They found the electrical cord tied around Bob's neck, tied in a bow. There were no physical signs of a struggle in the apartment. I think we need to jump forward a little bit, Gibbs, talk about Bob's funeral, and then circle back around to the investigation. But before we do that, I want to play just a quick clip of Bob from an interview that occurred just days before his death.
But I have no regrets in any of my life at this point.
No, you can't look backwards. No.
And the terrible thing is I'll be 50 in 2 weeks. I want to go out swinging, as they say.
So I know it's a short clip, but I wanted to get Bob talking in his own voice, and you can hear him say he's about ready to be 50 in 2 weeks. Bob's birthday is on July 13th.
Wow.
He's murdered on June 29th.
I mean, that's just days.
So you know that this had to be just right before he was murdered. And at the very end, he says, I want to go out swinging. It's so eerie to me, Gibbs. The guy's not even 50 years old. He's 49 years old, about ready to turn 50. And it's a strange foreshadowing that he's talking about that he wants to go out swinging. Now, you could look at that a couple different ways.
Well, you could.
That he wants to go out as a swinger or that he wants to go out fighting.
Yeah.
On July 5th, Bob's funeral was held at St. Paul the Apostle Catholic Church in Westwood. About 200 family members and friends attended the funeral. And Gibbs, we're talking about people like Patty Duke, John Aston, Carol O'Connor, who played Archie Bunker.
Yep, big names.
These are some big names back in those days. And Bob's pallbearers included a lot of his fellow co-stars from the Hogan's Hero show, as well as producers and other people like that. He was buried in Oakwood Memorial Park in Chatsworth, California. But Patricia Olson would later have Bob's remains relocated to Westwood Village Memorial Park in Westwood. And ultimately, after her death in 2007, she died from lung cancer. She would be buried right next to Bob under her stage name, Sigrid Valdez. So I just thought that was a very interesting story. Because I think even though these two divorced, there's just a part of me, Gibbs, that thinks they were very much in love. Even through the divorce.
Yeah, even the grave marking was interesting. What they had on it would say Hogan and Hilda together forever.
So let's get back to the investigation of Bob's murder. The Scottsdale Police Department, it was said, Gibbs, that they didn't even have a homicide division at that time. And basically, they weren't ready for this. They didn't have all of the equipment. They didn't have all of the vetted out procedures that you would need to analyze this type of crime scene correctly. And then add on top of that this is a very high profile murder. There's media. There's a lot of attention on this murder. We talked about the crime scene. Police really didn't turn up any major clues there. They didn't see any forced entry. It didn't look like a robbery because there wasn't, anything of any type of monetary value taken. And Bob Crane probably had some stuff in there that was worth money. They had to look at Bob's ex-wife, Patricia Olson. Not only was she his ex-wife, but they were still kind of seeing each other. They were able to rule her out pretty quickly. But even though they've ruled out Patricia, police are thinking early on that Bob's killer was probably somebody that he knew. They didn't feel like this was random. And it would be the Maricopa County medical examiner that would really put together some type of chronology of events of what they thought happened. And so they thought sometime during the early hours of June 29th, while Bob was sleeping on his right side, he was struck to the left side of his head with a blow from some type of heavy object. And then he received a second blow that crushed his skull. And this would have killed him instantly. This is what the medical examiner thought. And then for some reason, Gibbs, after Bob was dead, the killer tied the electrical cord around his neck, which is strange.
It is strange.
If he was in fact already dead. Now, maybe the killer didn't know that and thought that they wanted to make sure that Bob died. During the investigation, police would find a blood stain on the bed sheets that they thought came from the killer wiping down the murder weapon before they left. And police are later going to determine that it's most likely that the murder weapon was a camera tripod. And that's very interesting, Gibbs, because, I mean, just think about all the stuff that we've already talked about with Bob and John and their hobby, for lack of a better word, of videotaping themselves in sexual activity. You would think they probably had to use a camera tripod at some point. And it was during the police investigation that they found Bob's inventory of videotapes. And while doing this, they uncovered the connection that Bob had with John Carpenter and the fact that they filmed themselves together with women. So this had to put John Carpenter on police radar.
Absolutely, man. I mean, we talk about if something happened to somebody we know, they'll always, hey, could you erase my web browser?
Yeah, please delete my web browser.
Yeah, now this is another level.
This is a whole nother level.
Please go to that one closet in my house on the top shelf, grab those 2 shoe boxes full of
whatever and set it on fire immediately.
Don't open it. Just get rid of it, please.
And there's another thing that really piqued the interest of investigators as it related to John Carpenter, because he would actually call Bob Crane's apartment at about 3:15 p.m. And this is while police investigators are on the scene investigating the murder. And the police identified themselves to Carpenter, and they said that they were in Crane's apartment investigating an incident. And during this phone call, John Carpenter would tell police investigators that he had been out with Bob the night before until about 1 o'clock in the morning. But Carpenter would later change that time to 2:45 a.m. And that's important. He also told the police that he had flown back to Los Angeles that morning, had driven himself to the airport in his rental car. But the one thing that police noted as very odd is that John Carpenter never asked any questions about what police were calling an incident. And you got to think about this, Gibbs. If this is your friend, you're calling his apartment and the police are there, I would have 20 different questions. I would want to know what the hell's going on.
Yeah. What happened to him? Why it happened to him? What's going on?
I mean, he didn't even ask the most basic question, which is, where's Bob? Why is Bob not coming to the phone? And police figure out that John Carpenter had flown into Phoenix on June 25th to spend some time with Bob Crane. Remember, these guys were friends. And this is something that they did regularly. John would fly in from LA. He and Bob would spend time together. From the airport, John rented a car and drove to Scottsdale where Bob lived. And once the police figured this out, they wanted that rental car. And they would ultimately find it at a dealership because there was something wrong with the electrical wiring. It had been sent to this dealership for repairs. Police tracked it down. They impounded the car, brought it back to the police lot. And in searching the car, they found several blood smears that, when tested, would match Bob Crane's blood type. And during their investigation, police were able to confirm that no one else had been in that car, including John Carpenter, that had the same blood type as the blood that was found. Now, we're talking about blood typing here, Gibbs. We're not talking about DNA.
Big difference.
It is a big difference, evidence-wise. Blood typing can get you in the ballpark. It can't get you to seat 37A.
Right.
And that's a huge difference. But police don't have any other significant evidence. They have a strong suspicion that John Carpenter had something to do with Bob Crane's murder, but they can't prove it. And because of that, the Maricopa County attorney declines to file any charges against John Carpenter. And this is going to become a cold case. And it's not till 1990 that Scottsdale detective Jim Raines and former Phoenix homicide investigator would re-examine the evidence from 1978 and he would convince the county attorney at that time to reopen the case.
Within days of Bob Crane's murder, police believe the killer is his close friend, John Carpenter. They think Carpenter flew into a rage because Crane was about to end their friendship. The strongest evidence, blood, found in Carpenter's rental car, matching Bob Crane's blood type. But two county attorneys thought the evidence was weak, and they refused to put Carpenter on trial.
Look, I'm not here to criticize the 1978 investigation. Would I have done it differently? Would it have been done differently today? Absolutely.
We re-interviewed everybody involved in this case. We tracked down each and every person. We just basically eliminated everybody else on the planet.
All roads lead to John Carpenter.
Absolutely.
No doubt.
No doubt.
And he laid the tripod over the bloody sheet, and the tripod from the first nubs that you tighten up for the legs to the top of the tripod was like the identical length of the blood stain on the sheet.
So you hear detectives talk about reopening the case. They're going back, trying to re-interview people from back in 1978. And you also hear them talk about matching up that blood stain found on the bed sheet to a camera tripod. Now, we know by this time that DNA testing is widely available, and they test the blood sample that they recovered from John Carpenter's rental car, but it comes back inconclusive. But Detective Jim Raines finds some new evidence. Well, it's not really new evidence. It's more what you would call overlooked evidence, because it was available back in 1978. And it's a color photograph showing what prosecutors claimed to be a tiny piece of human tissue. And it was said that this photograph was taken by a criminologist from inside of John Carpenter's rental car back in 1978. But the problem that investigators have is that the actual tissue sample, what they actually recovered from the car, had at some point in time from 1978 to 1990 been misplaced.
Not too shocked there. I mean, we talk about this all the time. It seems to be an ongoing thing with these unsolved cases, right?
It's a big reason why things are not solved.
Yeah.
You know, if you call it shoddy police work, if you call it bad evidence handling, whatever you call it, this is a major piece of an investigation, major piece of evidence that somehow got lost. Bottom line.
Yep.
But what authorities do is they have this photograph, and they're saying that what you see in the photograph, this piece of tissue, came from Bob Crane's head. And their theory is it stuck to the murder weapon, which they believe to be a camera tripod.
Right.
That John Carpenter took the tripod with him, put it in his car, and in doing so, that's how the blood and the tissue was transferred from the tripod to his car door. As part of reopening the case, investigators also talked to John Carpenter again.
You have the right to the presence of an attorney. Do you understand these rights?
I understand the rights the way you read them. My question to you is that prior to an agreement on these rights here, what I was under the impression, correct me if I'm wrong before I make my statement to you, that I was coming here to help you out, not put me in. And I'm really very apprehensive about this. You shook me up with the blood on my car, which, like I said, I don't know where that came from, and I don't know how much there was. Then when you said to me, you know, why did I kill Bob Crane? Well, I told you right off the start I didn't, and I would never do that. You implied and directly told me that I had direct contact with Bob Crane's death.
Yes. In fact, we'll get to that.
We're trying to talk to you about the murder of Bob Crane.
This I
that occurred in
understand.
Scottsdale.
This I understand.
And what do you think about that?
I think it's a great, but when you sit across from me and accuse me of killing my best friend, one of my best friends.
Well, I'm still thinking that you did.
All right, then fine. Then
In fact, I think I would be able to probably prove that you
Then fine.
did.
Then I'm not going to say another word. I'm sorry.
Well, I don't know
here.
if you should say another word or not.
Then I'm sorry.
What do you mean you're sorry? You're sorry you killed him? Are you? Or do you think you deserved it? Why don't you tell me about that? Let's get right to it. I think you're about ready to tell us about it, and let's get right with it. What happened in Scottsdale, Arizona to cause you to kill Bob Crane?
If you ever get pulled in, right or wrong, I think you got to grab a freaking attorney, man. After anything I've learned.
Yeah.
I don't care how good you think you are. You need an attorney just to shut people down.
Right. You can tell from that, Gibbs, that early on, John Carpenter is thinking that he's being brought in to try to help solve his friend's murder. But it doesn't take very long for him to figure out that he's being put in the hot seat. And there, towards the end of the interview, police are going right after him. I mean, they're not even trying to deceive him at that point. They're basically saying, hey, we know you killed Bob Crane. Why don't you just tell us why and what happened?
They're going for the juggler.
No doubt. But John doesn't crack. I mean, he doesn't tell him. He doesn't give in.
Mm-mm.
But regardless, they arrest him in June of 1992, and they charge him with the murder of Bob Crane. And his trial would not start until 1994. And at trial, Bob Crane's oldest son, Robert, would testify that in the weeks before his father's murder, Bob Crane repeatedly conveyed a desire to end his friendship with John Carpenter. He said that John had become what he called a hanger-on and a nuisance to the point of being obnoxious. Bob's son Robert was quoted as saying, "My dad expressed that he just didn't need Carpenter kind of hanging around him anymore." And he testified that his dad had called Carpenter the night before the murder and ended their friendship.
And we know they went out that night.
No, we know they did. And this was part of the police theory that John murdered Bob because he had ended their friendship and he was upset about that.
Yeah. And I think originally John said he was out till 1 o'clock with him, and then he came back around and said, no, it was actually 3 o'clock or something like that.
Yeah, 2:45.
2:45,
something
yeah.
like that.
So maybe he got that phone call from Bob in between those times.
And just maybe he came back after that.
Maybe he did. Said, we're not going to be friends.
Well, at least that's what the police are thinking.
Sure.
But Carpenter's attorney, goes after the prosecution pretty hard, stating that all they have is a circumstantial case. The defense would present a witness that said that they saw Carpenter and Crane having dinner together the night before the murder. So the defense is really playing up the angle that these two guys are best friends. And why would one best friend want to murder the other?
Exactly.
And they would bring to the stand a number of character witnesses. We're talking about employers, neighbors, and even jilted ex-lovers. And all of these people described John Carpenter as a gentleman, as a good guy. They really were painting him as a person that would not have committed this murder.
Yeah, couldn't hurt a fly.
Yeah. The defense reminded the jury that the murder weapon was never found, and that the prosecution's theory that the murder weapon was a tripod was just that, a theory. And then we get to this photo of the brain tissue. And really, Gibbs, the defense was able to kind of tear this up a little bit. They talked about the mishandling of evidence because we know the real sample of the brain tissue had been lost. And the defense is saying, what do you have? You have a picture. You're showing us a picture and you're trying to connect that picture to the crime scene.
Not a very strong case.
It's really not. The defense also brought up the fact that the police were so focused on Carpenter that they failed to follow up on other leads that may have actually led them to the real killer. And one of the very interesting points that they brought up, and they had to bring this up, was Bob's proclivity for taping women during sexual acts. And the reason why they had to bring this up was to point out the fact that a lot of these women had significant others, whether it was a boyfriend or a husband. So you're talking about a lot of people potentially that could have had an axe to grind with Bob Crane.
Yeah, including, maybe the women said, I didn't know I was being recorded. Most likely they did. And then their career might have went a direction that they did not want those tapes to ever be seen.
Well, yeah, it's kind of tough when you look over and you see the red blinking light on the big 1978 camera. But
I mean, you probably know better than anybody.
But you're right. I mean, that could have that's a theory as well, right? It's not just the significant others, but maybe one of these women, even knowing that, maybe they got upset about it later after the fact.
Like it's been said, he would tape them and basically
discard
them like toilet paper, like his ex said. And if they felt that way, maybe they felt a different connection.
It could have rubbed them the wrong way.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Now, another suspect that the defense brought forward was an actor who Bob Crane had a pretty violent argument with just a few months prior to his death. And this happened in Texas when Bob was doing dinner theater there. So again, I think the defense is thinking, this is one of those leads that maybe the police didn't follow up on because they were so focused on John Carpenter.
Yeah. I mean, what they're trying to do, like any good attorney would do, is just constantly put that reasonable doubt into the jury's head.
That's what you got to do. Carpenter would say during a news interview, quote, "I don't go around and kill my pals. I played around a lot, balled a lot of women." That's the term he used.
They used that back then. Bald.
Okay. "And I've made mistakes that hurt people close to me. I'm no saint, but I never even had a fight with Bob, damn it." This is what he's telling the news person. "He was my friend, and he was the goose who laid the golden egg for me in terms of meeting ladies." And you really have to think about that, Gibbs. This is a man that was not famous, John Carpenter, who had this really close friendship with a man that was famous. So had money, was able to meet a lot of women. So you really do have to think about that. Why would you kill this man that is kind of
feeding your habit?
Yeah. I mean, again, I don't know if it's true or not, but you have to take it into consideration. In the end, when the trial's said and done, Carpenter was acquitted of murder. And it's really not that hard to figure out that was going to happen. The prosecution went forward with this, but they really just didn't have the evidence to back it up, to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. And John Carpenter would maintain his innocence until his death, which would happen just 4 years later in 1998. After the trial, Robert Crane, Bob's son, would come out publicly and say that he had a suspicion that Bob's widow, Patricia Olson, could have possibly had a role in this crime. And one of his thoughts, Gibbs, is that she was the only person that really benefited from Bob Crane's murder. She got all of the money. Bob left all of his money to her, excluded Robert Crane, his siblings, his mother, everyone. Bob left the entire estate to Patricia Olson. And Robert Crane would actually write a book in 2015 in which he would detail out or repeat some of these suspicions. But Maricopa County District Attorney Rick Romley, who prosecuted the case against John Carpenter, would respond to some of these allegations. And he would say, "We never characterized Patty Olson as a suspect. He's convinced that John Carpenter murdered Bob Crane and nobody else." Officially, Bob Crane's murder remains unsolved. But in November of 2016, the Maricopa County Attorney's Office did permit Phoenix television reporter John Hook to submit the 1978 blood samples from Carpenter's rental car for retesting. Because you have to figure, by 2016, the DNA testing techniques were so
superior.
Right, that's the word. Thank you. They were much more advanced than even they were in 1990. I mean, 16 years in the world of DNA is almost like a lifetime.
It really, yeah.
And how far it's come.
Probably multiple lifetimes.
I'm not a scientist, but I'm saying that anyway.
Will modern DNA science prove John Carpenter killed actor Bob Crane in 1978? If the blood found in John Carpenter's car is from Bob Crane, Carpenter is almost certainly the killer. There is no other plausible explanation. So if they find this is Bob Crane's DNA in that blood, case closed.
Case closed.
How much do you trust the science?
1,000%.
If it's not your dad's blood, if it's type B from somebody else, then cops maybe spent 3 decades looking at the wrong guy.
I know. Oh my God. Yeah, that'd be like an earthquake to me.
So that's John Hook in 2016 talking with Robert Crane as John is getting ready to have this DNA testing done. Now, when the DNA testing comes back, 2 different sequences were identified. One from an unknown male, which means that sequence couldn't be from John Carpenter. It's from a male that doesn't have their DNA in the system. And the other sequence was so degraded, too degraded, that they couldn't reach a conclusion. So that sequence technically could be John Carpenter, but there's no way to tell. So even after all that,
We're still unsolved.
we're still unsolved. I don't know if this one ever gets solved, Gibbs. They've done new testing with much more advanced techniques. A lot of the major players that were involved in this case have since passed.
Yeah.
It's going to be a tough one.
I think it's going to be a tough one.
You know, a lot of the cases we do, we're saying, okay, if new DNA or some type of DNA thing comes forward, they'll solve it.
Right.
This one to me is almost like somebody's going to have a deathbed confession or something like that.
One suspect's already dead, so I don't think anything's going to come from it, and it's just one of those ones that we don't know anything.
All right, Gibbs, so we have some voicemails. Let's go ahead and play them.
Hey, Mike. Hey, Gibby. This is Shelley. I just want to tell y'all you are my absolute favorite podcast. I listen to TCAT and TCAT Unsolved constantly, and I mean constantly, and love every minute of it. I am hashtag Team Mikey and Gibby, by the way. Can't go one or the other. I just wanted to tell y'all I'm from a little town called Midlothian, Texas, and we have a great story from the 80s about an undercover police officer that was killed here, and it is an interesting story. It goes into devil worship, everything. And then just a little over a year ago, Missy Beavers was murdered here, and it's still unsolved. And it was somebody dressed in SWAT clothes, a police officer's uniform. And it's a pretty interesting story. Anyhow, I just wanted to tell y'all I love you, listen to you all the time. Wish you could make me a podcast a day, but I know you have lives. So, be safe and keep your own time ticking.
Oh, great voicemail from Shelley.
Loved it.
Loved everything about it. And we will definitely check into some of those cases.
Hi, Mike and Gibby. What is up? This is Emma calling from beautiful, sunny Alberta, Canada. I work in early childhood development, and I listen to your show to escape that every day. Just something interesting, you mentioned that Kenneth Bianchi was born to an alcoholic mother, and it just sounds to me that he might have had fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. So some of the results of this can be learning difficulties, difficulty focusing. They can appear to be highly intelligent due to their great communication skills, but underlying there's a lack of understanding. There's difficulty understanding consequences, chronic stealing, lack of understanding boundaries, often resulting in sexual misconduct, urinary disorders, another thing you mentioned, and most importantly is a lack of empathy. So our prisons are full of people with this completely preventable disorder, so just a shout out to mothers out there, please don't drink while pregnant. Anyway, I love your show, listen to you every day, and keep up the good work, and keep your own time ticking.
Another great voicemail from M.
Yeah, I like that.
Gibbs, I think we have some of the smartest listeners. I mean, we learn stuff all the time.
We do. Yeah.
We literally have some listeners with some very advanced degrees.
Yeah.
Some very specific knowledge, and they like to share it, and we love it.
I do love it. And those hashtag Team Gibby, wow, they're really top notch, man.
They're the smartest.
They are.
Hashtag Team Gibby are smarter. All right, so that's it for us. That's it for another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.